And we are live. Howdy, folks, as you're coming on in. Just going to hang out for a minute as folks show up, and then we're going to just dive into this first year lesson. How's everyone doing today? We're trying out a new time for these, new time slot for all of our broadcasts, actually. We're going to have these, at least for the time being, at this time slot every other lesson, and then 12 hours delayed for the other time slot, just so we can try and get a more global audience rather than the people who are around my dinner time, because we don't want people to sleep through these, even though they're not required or necessary in any way. I want to give folks the opportunity to show on up. So just going to hang out here for just a couple minutes as folks start to trickle in, and then we'll get going. While we do that, I'm just going to check my messages that I haven't read, because some people chat a lot while I'm not awake. Hello, No Breaks. Good evening, Blast Action Hero. How you doing? Howdy, Ketchup. How do people normally pronounce your name, Blast Action Hero? I guess I could see like Blast Tact Ion Hero if you really wanted to like say it in a different way. But that takes a lot of effort. Okay, yeah, I mean, the last act Ion Hero, like that is somebody who's using their ion cannons to take down a superstar destroyer or something. And being the last act Ion Hero, like end of the movie, saving the day, that seems worth it. That's not the end of the world. But yeah. Alrighty. Uh Kalantaris, hey, how you doing? A B can just be a B sometimes, Gorn21. Phantom Physics, excited to pass the exam. I am excited for everybody who has taken the exam and everybody who has passed the exam. At some point, I'd like to share some of the stats with folks. I just probably want to wait until like the rate of new data coming in slows down a little bit. But we've had over 800 people take the test, and I'm really excited to see everybody joining the community, everybody who's taken the test. I feel deeply for the people who've missed by one question. It does really hurt to just be like, oh, I was right there on the edge. But we give you that 4-question buffer. We don't expect you to be perfect, and that's what that 4-question buffer is. Kalantaris, will the Judge Apprentice exam be evergreen, or do I think it'll be retired in a while? I don't think the exam... How to phrase this? So the exam itself, as structured, will be retired. But that's because my intention is to add another 20 to 80 questions, so that when somebody shows up and says, hey, I want to take the Judge Apprentice exam, we serve them 20 random questions. And then they take that test. And so the test is going to be unique to each candidate, and so it's just a little bit harder to like talk with somebody who's taken the test before and been like, hey, what are the questions, what are the answers. With a pool of questions, we'll be able to use that. What we're also going to do, there is one question on the test. If you've taken it, you're like, this is some nonsense. There's one question on the test that has a very low pass rate, something like 60 or 70% of people did not get that question right, partially because of the wording, partially because of the strangeness of the question itself. And so that will likely be pushed to a level 1 or maybe even a level 2 exam, where some of the questions that have, I think there's one question where out of the 800 people who have answered the question, one person has gotten it incorrect. And that might have been somebody misclicking or misreading something and not knowing it. And that question will be retired because it's not actually meaningfully testing anything if everybody is getting it correct. Jarman says some of the questions were definitely worded weirdly. I have concerns about the wording on the questions. I wrote them and I want them to be readable by everybody, but also be technically correct, which is a balance that I need to run. If you have feedback on the exact structure of any particular questions, either send it to me over Discord or send it to me through email, and I can get a hand on it. Jimmy DeHaan, passed the test but regret taking it distracted on my phone. Next time I'm going to sit down and take it with more intention. Yeah, I think that's something that hit a lot of people. A lot of people were very excited to take the test, dove in, immediately took the test, and regretted it to some degree because they didn't do as well as they would want. Gorn, yeah, you're probably hearing my Discord. I didn't mute my output for whatever reason before this broadcast. Or input, rather. But yeah, I think that one of the things that we want to stress is taking your time with the test and taking the time to prepare before the test. I know many, many people are just very excited to get this certification, but that's not always the best way to go about taking a test. Blast Action Hero asks, how do I know if I passed? So when you completed the test, you should have gotten an email to the email that you dropped into the exam itself that goes over all of the questions. If you got at least 16 questions correct, you've passed the test. I have to manually go into the Google form results, check the scores, pull out emails, and add them to the Nexus site to get you the certification online. And then have to grab your Discord, send it to a bot in Discord, and have the bot assign you that role. So it's a manual process of getting that recognition on Nexus and on Discord that takes me a little bit of time. Gorn asks, what about a time limit? Will that be added in the future? I will be honest, I wouldn't have passed if there was one. So we would like to have time tests in the future. That is one of our goals. One of the things that we want to do is create... The goal of the test is not, can you read the comprehensive rules or have you read the comprehensive rules? It's, can you answer questions effectively as a judge? And this means restructuring the questions so that they are more like questions that a player asks when like, hey, judge, can I do this? Or what happens if I'll do this? Which are questions players will ask rather than these contrived scenarios. The realistic scenarios are much harder to write good questions and answers for, which is one of the reasons we rely on suboptimal questions sometimes, because they are more functional. Many ideal questions, the answer is yes or no, and there isn't really a whole lot of in between. And so what I'm getting to is, yes, we want to have a time limit. I expect the time limit to be roughly 2 minutes per question, as just like 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes per question is my rough guess of how long we want the time limit to be. We don't want you to have infinite time to take the test. because when you are taking a judge call, there is a time pressure on you because there's the event around you, and so you can't spend 5 minutes looking up the comprehensive rules. But we don't want it to be too punitive because it's not the normal structure of how questions are actually asked. Tennessee Feet Monk, templating should be a focus going forward for sure. Yeah, we want to change the way that the cards are displayed. We want to make sure that there's links or the card information displayed very clearly rather than just using card images. Pulling it up on your phone, you're not going to be able to see the card images terribly well just due to technological limitations. We're working on implementing the testing on Nexus and getting things improved that way. Just reading through. Alrighty, so that's a bunch of questions. Let me just... Discord's shouting at me for something. Great. I can ignore that for now. So, with that conversation about the exam out of the way, I think we're ready to dive into today's lesson. Oh boy. Dataram USA. I'm gonna mangle the pronunciation of that name. I thought I had that in the lessons. If it's not in the lessons, that's something that I need to improve. I want to make sure that we're not testing you on anything we didn't teach you or tell you to study explicitly. Shoot me a message on Discord, and I will be able to look into that a little bit more thoroughly. Yeah, I want to make sure that you have enough time to answer questions, and that the time pressure is a concern if you're spending an excessive amount of time on questions, but is not if you're just going through them at a standard or slightly slower than standard pace. Talish GG, I think the test missing some questions about TO or something about events that can happen in a tournament. This is intentional. The Judge Apprentice test is designed to test rules knowledge only. The level 1 test is where we're going to start having training for how to run events, and that's where we're going to teach you what you need to know from the master event document. We're going to teach you what you need to know from the tournament regulations. But that is not an expectation for Judge Apprentices, and so that is not something that we tested folks on. Right now, a lot of the folks entering into the Judge program are very excited to work events and are very excited to start judging actively. However, we're building for the long term, and in the long term, a lot of people are going to show up and dip their toe in the water and want to figure out if this is for them. And starting with rules knowledge is where we want to be. Torian, to be honest, it's not about rules knowledge, more about reading with understanding the test. That is the conflict of any test and examination strategy. In an ideal world, I or another expert would be able to sit down with each candidate and talk with them for an hour about the rules of the game and test their understanding that way. That is wildly unfeasible. It would be half a year's work to test everybody who's tested in the past 4 days. And structures that allow for a little bit more individual expression, so open response questions, that sort of thing, also have much higher time costs, and we simply do not realistically have that time. And so, yeah, we're using a flawed tool to test folks. Atorian, I want to be clear, I will take everything seriously and also, at the same point, nothing seriously. Sometimes reading jokes through text can be hard, and so I want to treat everything as though it were serious, because that's how other people might read it. The monkey does give it away that it's maybe not so serious, but I still want to treat it seriously in case somebody reads it I want to be able to address it rather than being like, no, it's not. I want to address it seriously so that we don't come across as dismissive. Kalantares, can you do a Palpatine voice? Good morning, my young apprentice. If my voice cracks again, 100% absolutely. Will we eventually get to a paradigm where existing L2 or L3 judges will take part in mentoring candidates for L1? Ideally, yes. Ideally, I can't teach everybody. As much as I would like to teach every judge, we have over 2,000 people in the Discord, and as much as I'm active in there, I cannot instruct everybody. And what will happen is judges will teach each other simply by talking to them. When you're working an event with somebody and you consult somebody on a ruling, you'll ask them a question, they'll give you an answer, and you'll have a discussion about it. And even if it's not explicit mentorship where it's like, hey, I'm going to sit you down and teach you the rules, there's implicit mentorship in giving guidance on individual calls and rulings at events. I do hope that judges are proactive in their local communities, teaching folks who are excited as the game grows. There will be people who are like, hey, I'm interested in becoming a judge. You're a judge. How do I do it? And even as an L1, you can, or even as a judge apprentice, you can be like, well, step one, go to nexus.cascadegames.com, sign up for the Discord, sign up for an account there, take some lessons, take a test. But doing some in-store mentorship, that sort of thing, would be great. I'd love to see that sort of thing. Nilrim54, I won't take the test on my phone again. I missed some questions because I didn't pay attention to the cards closely. Yeah, this is one of the challenges of online testing. Jimmy DeHand asks, I know data dumps can be a luxury and that your time is limited, but will there be a heat map or indication of locations for judges? One of the things that we're working on, now that we have profile editing available on Nexus, one of the things that we're working on next is profile privacy settings, and you will be able to set your location to private or public. Note that it would be public only to people logged in, not to everybody. So there won't be a heat map, but tournament organizers and event organizers will be able to search for judges by state, country, province, that sort of thing. Tennessee Feet Monk, is there a specific reason Cascade Games went with five judge levels? As we know, Magic had 5 levels and determined that 3 to 5 did very similar things and pared it down to 3 levels. So, let's talk about that for a minute. Hi, I'm Jonah. I'm the program director for Cascade Games. Previously, I was the Levels and Advancement Manager for Judge Academy, which was the organization running the Magic Judge program, and I was defining levels over there. At the time, Magic had 3 levels, 1 through 3, unsurprisingly, with 3 being the capstone. The issue there is that one of the challenges that the Magic program ran into historically with that 3-level system is that the floor between level 2 and level 3 was extreme. At level 2, you were expected to be able to run a 16 to 32 player competitive event on your own. The next thing that you were tested for at level 3 was, are you able to head judge a 400 to 1,000 player event with a team of 10 to 30 judges? And that meant that there was no training at all, no explicit training and no explicit path between those two steps. It went like 16 player regular or casual tier event, then head judge a 16 player competitive tier event, and then head judge a several hundred player competitive event with a team of many judges. And there's a lot of skills between those two. Recently, the judge program under the International Judge Program and Judge Foundry for Magic have switched to a 5-level system as well that's very similar to what we have here. When I was working at Judge Academy, I was building some intermediate steps in the terms of small event lead and medium event lead certifications so that folks could get from 2 to 3 with stepping stones. But yeah, filling the gap between a 32-player event and a 400-player event is pretty important. Level 2 is our like 32-ish player event. Level 3 is like around 100, 128 players, so Planetary Qualifier head judge is targeted at level 3. Level 4 is head judge of a couple hundred players, so 400-ish players. And then level 5 is the ability to head judge Galactic Championship events, sector and regionals, like thousands of players or very high-profile events. How to run organized play. The tournament software is very important. Yes, Fantasy Flight Games is aware of this, and they mentioned on one of their in-flight streams, I think close to a month ago now, that they're working with a third-party provider of tournament software, and I think they're planning on releasing that soon. I don't know. I believe the goal was to have it before the October Planetary Qualifiers. Atorian asks, what will the distribution of level 3 to 5 judges be in Europe, especially with countries that have no specific translation? I can't predict what the distribution of high-level judges is going to be. It depends significantly on the presence of organized play. If there aren't events that require judges of a given level, there won't be judges of that level. If you're in an area that doesn't have events with 1,000 players, there won't be a place for you to get the experience required to become a level 5 judge, and there's no requirement for level 5 judges in your area, and so it'll be harder for you to achieve the prerequisites for that. I think Europe in general is going to be a relatively active region with, I think, 18 planetary qualifiers for October. That's a reasonable number, spread out over a variety of countries. So, I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. Kalantarius, how will you determine who judges the Galactic Championship? Will I do it? The Galactic Championship staffing is not something that we've discussed with FFG at this point in time. That's going to be discussed way closer to the event itself, several months beforehand. Right now we're focused on October, then we're going to be focused on planetary qualifiers after that. When we get to the Galactic Championship, that's something that we're going to discuss. I would love to judge at the Galactic Championship. I'd like to think that I have some qualifications in understanding of the rules and policy and with tournament experience, but I don't know what the plan is exactly with that. Jimmy the Hand says, I found when I'm explaining a ruling or talking to players about a ruling, I'll have the players talk about their experience with MTG, Magic the Gathering. I try to curb this line of thinking, but is this something you recommend as well? Sometimes that background can help players understand why a ruling is the way that it is. Okay, so, generally, answering most questions, 90% of the time, I'm not, 95, maybe even 98% of the time, I'm not going to ask a player what their familiarity is with the game, because I think the vast majority of the time I'm able to explain it to them in a way that they understand what the rule is. Sometimes if they're like, hey, I'm confused or that doesn't make sense to me, I will tell them, okay, what is your point of confusion? What are you understanding? What aren't you understanding? And we'll have a bit of a conversation. Sometimes there's like a complex ruling that comes up frequently. So something involving Crate Dragon or Lurking TIE Phantom. Players might be like, Judge, how does this work? My opponent says X, I say Y. Which one of us is correct? And what I'll do in that case is say, the short answer is X. Are you interested in the long answer? And sometimes the players just want to know the answer to the ruling and don't care why it's the way it is. They trust you because you're the judge, you're the expert, and they don't want you to pull up the comprehensive rules and say, in section 1.7.4 and in section 2.6.4.c and in this other place, you pull those three rules together and it comes up with this. And they just don't care about that at all. And so if they ask, I'll go into that detail, but otherwise I don't. Atorian asks, how can I get level 3 judge? Short answer, right now you can't. That's not going to be something that anybody's going to be able to get for quite a while. I wouldn't expect it until the spring at the earliest. However, The way it's going to work is for the October wave of planetary qualifiers, there was the Season 0 evaluation, the Season 0 assessment, and we're recommending folks based on that. For the next wave of planetary qualifiers, the plan is to have the Level 1 certification available, as well as event staffing tools available on Nexus for event organizers to use. And we're going to say, you can staff any Level 1 judge. These are people that have the highest amount of training and evaluation. Select somebody you are comfortable with from this list. And then we're going to have Level 2 judges, and we'll say, hey, if you're running a planetary qualifier, you need to select a Level 2 judge as your head judge. And then finally, when we have Level 3 judges, we'll say, hey, you need to pick somebody who is a Level 3 judge. It will take a while to get to that point, because one of the important things is understanding how events are run and getting that practical experience. That is going to be a requirement for various levels. And so even if you have experience with other games, you don't have experience running Star Wars, you don't have experience with the policy, getting that experience is going to be an important step, and it will be a road bump on the way to getting that certification. Let's see, what other questions do we have? With examples for other games, I think when you are teaching the game and doing a demo, that's a great place to use that. Or if the player brings it up and they're like, but in Magic, or but in Pokemon, X happens. And you're like, so Pokemon is a different game, in fact. It's called Pokemon, and this is called Star Wars. Don't be that sassy to your players. Please don't be mean to your players. I would not introduce other games. If a player says, my understanding comes from this other card game, and my understanding in that other card game is X, then you can, if you have that shared understanding, you can build off of that. But most of the time I would just avoid it entirely, because frequently players are also going to be wrong about that other game that they're very familiar with. In my decade of judging Magic, players get stuff wrong all the time, and if they're just like, okay, I'm going to now use my incorrect knowledge about Magic to apply super incorrectly to Star Wars, oh boy. Will FFG provide trainer decks to help teach new players? Magic has those free decks with commons and such to teach basic mechanics. Expecting players to buy the $20 two players deck stinks right now. So I think Magic has actually stopped releasing those. I haven't seen one in a while. They might still have some older demo decks. I don't know what the process is for acquiring them. I don't know if FFG has any plans to create demo decks. Something that we're doing in the Discord and eventually we'll have up on Nexus is a project that we're calling Bulk for Beginners, where we're designing a deck for each leader from each set based on commons and some uncommons, and just give them away. After you draft, if you already have all of the commons, they're not really worth that much to you. And so building a deck out of those that's functional and handing them off to somebody else, that's something that we're trying to support and encourage in the community. Tunnel Safety Commissioner asks, is there any training, maybe YouTube, that you would recommend for teaching tournament organization and running it as a judge? I'm pretty confident in my game rules knowledge, but I've never run an event. That's one of the things that we're going to be doing in lessons, I want to say 14 to 17 for level 1. We're going to be talking about how to run an event, how to apply tournament policy, the various logistics, how to answer a judge call, all of that stuff. It'll be a very introductory level, but that's one resource. Your other resource, and this is another resource that exists, is the old Judge Academy videos for Magic. There are some videos for the level 1 training that are still available. I don't know how much longer they will be available, but if you go to judgeacademy.com, go to level 1 and go to tournament operations and logistics, you'll have to do a whole bunch of stuff. It's probably not worth it in the long run, just because those videos are about to go away and it'll be talking about Magic and not Star Wars Unlimited. Wait a couple months and we'll have some lessons. Are there plans for judge software where we can share our tournaments? Also, how about past big tournaments? the ideal is that, yes, the tournament software will be baked in and connected to our side of things, and so you'll be able, either we'll be able to reference the events that you were on, or we'll be able to pull data from that, or you'll be able to link to those events and we'll be able to find it and confirm that way. Past large tournaments, yes, they'll count. If you have experience, it doesn't matter when you got that experience. When the judge program is up and running, what is the biggest thing a level 1 will be expected to be able to handle as a head judge? A store showdown or a pre-release. A 32, maybe a 64-player casual tier event is the largest thing that we expect you to be able to handle as a level 1 judge. Above 32 players, we would expect you to have another judge with you. Running a 64-player event on your own is doable, but it doesn't lead to an optimal experience. But yeah, just in-store regular tier or casual tier play. Sorry, regular is from a different game, and I'm stuck in my reflexes. But being able to run either a large pre-release or a showdown, or like a large casual tier event at a larger tournament. At a convention, they might have some large open entry casual tier events, and being able to run one of those might be expected of a level 1 judge. However, beyond like 64 players, I would not expect a level 1 to necessarily have the skills for that. That would not be the floor, that would not be the baseline requirement of a level 1 judge. Okay. I know I haven't transitioned to slides, but that's because this lesson didn't have slides. Oh boy. I don't know the software, all haven't seen it, but is there an expectation where previous players who've been disqualified or banned will get flagged for your event in the software? I don't know if players who've been disqualified will be flagged. I believe that there will be some communication between FFG and the tournament software, where if a player is banned, that information will be in the tournament software. I believe that is the expectation, but I'm not positive on that. I haven't seen this software, I haven't seen it interact, so I can't comment on that directly. Okay, great. We're going to transition to the slides. Hey, the slides are me talking, because this one was a little bit different, and it was a video just of me talking to y'all. I just want to go through what it means to be a judge. This lesson, as I mentioned in the lesson itself, is a little bit different and a little bit more philosophical. And philosophy is a term that I throw around a lot. Whether I'm talking about rules philosophy, policy philosophy, tournament philosophy, judge program philosophy, I talk about philosophy a lot. When I use that term, what I mean is, what's the guiding light behind it? What is thought process behind it? And so when I'm talking about policy philosophy, it's not what does policy say to do, but it's why is policy written in this way? When I talk about judge program philosophy, it's not what are the requirements to reach level 1, but it's why are the requirements to reach level 1 the reason that they are that. So this conversation is a little bit more philosophical in that manner. I think having a good understanding of the why behind things is very important to understanding the how and the what. When things aren't working out, when the rules and policy or training don't cover the situation you're in, and that will happen, look towards the philosophy. Star Wars Unlimited is supposed to be fun, and it's supposed to be fair. If people aren't having fun, even at a competitive event, if people aren't having fun, that's an issue. If the games aren't fair, that's a problem. When policy as written results in something that is unfair to the players and unfun, there's a concern there. If the rules are unfair and unfun and don't make sense, that's a concern. I'm not encouraging you to deviate from the rules or policy. I want to make that clear. But if the policy doesn't cover something, if the rules don't cover something, if the training that I give you doesn't cover something, stay true to fun and stay true to fair, and you shouldn't go too far wrong. When considering fair, though, keep in mind that there are two players in the game. If a player makes a mistake and the remedy for it, it feels very punitive to one player. Um, be aware that making things better for the player who made the error comes at a cost to the fairness and potentially the fun for the other player. And so you can't just blindly make things fair and fun for the person you're talking about, because that's not actually making things fair. That's just making things fun for them. And you need to balance that fairness. Yeah, the hard part is deciding when one player's fun is ruining other players' fun more than reasonable. Now, some of it is mechanical and you're not able to get away from that. Some people don't like playing against aggressive decks because they're like, but I didn't have time to set up my cool big thing. And other players don't like playing against control decks. They're like, I'm never allowed to have a unit in play, and that's not fun. And that is all reasonable. However, if a player is playing a control deck and mocking the player who doesn't have any units and being like, haha, you don't get to have any units, you don't get to have any fun, that's not fun. That is outside of the rules of the game, and that's something that you can address. You can be like, hey, my friend, you're making this person actively have less fun doing things outside of the game, and that is not appropriate for the space that we're in. One of the things that I want to talk about is that we are gatekeepers. Gatekeeping is, in a lot of communities, a dirty word, because gatekeepers are people who prevent others from joining communities. Our job is to make sure that the gates stay open and people are welcomed in, and that people are trying to close the gates, or people that aren't intentionally trying to close the gates, but whose behavior or attitudes are driving people away, rectify that behavior. As a judge, you're going to be seen by a lot of people as a formal authority associated with the game. In one of the early Judge Apprentice lessons, I mentioned explicitly that your judges are not employees of Fantasy Flight Games. Players will think that you're an employee or associated with or are friends with the folks who work at Fantasy Flight Games. And while you might have those connections, you're not. But they will still believe that you are. They'll believe that you are very important. And it's true, you are important. But you're important because they believe you're important. Everybody in the community who supports you as a judge and the event organizer, you are put on a stage, sometimes literally at larger events. In your local store, though, you're going to get everybody's attention and say, hey, everybody listen to me, this is the event that we're doing, this is what we're doing now. People will listen to you. And so when people start to distribute inappropriate behavior, whether it be mocking a new player or just being like a little bit of a bully while playing an aggro deck, being like, haha, you never got to play anything, I won so fast, I'm so good at this game, you can challenge them a little bit and be like, hey, that's not the attitude that we're trying to have here. We want to make sure that everybody is actually having as much fun as possible. Let's turn to some questions real quick, or some comments. Gorn21 says, more often than not, judge calls won't be resolved perfectly. Judges can only explain rules, issue penalties, and try to fix a broken game state. The result is nearly never perfect. We just have to make the best out of the situation we are given. Absolutely. Like, that's where the judgment, like the judge and judgment, we use our judgment a lot. In Star Wars Unlimited, will judge ruling be followed even if it's wrong? I lost a match in a Magic pre-release due to an incorrect judge ruling and want to know the procedure. In that vein, can players challenge ruling? Thank you, Tunnel Safety Commissioner. So, you have the ability to appeal, and the head judge will make the final ruling. That the head judge's ruling is the final ruling. You are always allowed to have a conversation with that head judge. You can say, hey, I appeal this ruling. The floor judge said XYZ. I believe that's not true. And the head judge might say, nope, my floor judge is correct. That's my final ruling. You're like, hold on. Before we get there, can you show me that in the comprehensive rules? Because my understanding from this thing was this other thing. you need to remember to be polite and respectful. You can't demand that they show you the comprehensive rules, but just be like, hey, my understanding was different because of these things, and you can point to your understanding in the comprehensive rules. But if they're like, nope, your understanding is incorrect, it's this, when the head judge says that their rule is final, their ruling is final. If you disagree with the ruling that the head judge has made, the final ruling, going to the event organizer or the tournament organizer, that is a little weird because the tournament organizer or event organizer often is not going to be a judge, and they're often not going to know the rules. And so they'll be able to listen to your complaint and be like, okay, I hear what you say. However, I don't know the rules better than the person I hired to know the rules. And so they'll just, if they get a bunch of complaints like that, they'll probably be like, okay, look, buddy, they'll talk with the judge afterwards and be like, hey, I got a bunch of complaints that you were wrong about these things. And the judge will either say, no, I'm right, here's my answers, or I was just saving face, I don't want to be wrong in front of players. And at that point, the event organizer is like, I'm not going to staff you again, because if you're wrong, you need to tell players that you're wrong. How can the community protect itself from bad or corrupt judges? If somebody is not following the Fantasy Flight Games community guidelines, which are available on Fantasy Flight, whether they are a player, a judge, or an event organizer, let Fantasy Flight know. They are the ones who are managing the community directly in that way. If a judge is bad, that's a loaded question. A judge who doesn't have all the knowledge that they need just needs more learning, more education. If they refuse to get that knowledge, that's a problem. And like at that point, like speaking with other judges, speaking with event organizers, letting them know about your negative experiences is the way you protect yourself from future bad experiences. Giving feedback in a constructive and healthy way is the way to do that. As Tennessee Feet Monk says, judges are going to get rulings wrong. Tennessee Feet Monk has done that. I have done it. I have gotten calls wrong on the largest stage. I've gotten calls wrong on stage, on stream of the largest stage for Magic the Gathering. It doesn't feel good. And what a good judge will do when they get a question wrong, because all judges will get questions wrong, is go to the players as soon as they're aware, say, hey, I made a mistake. Please pause your game. Let us see have we moved too far from my mistake? How can we rectify this? If a judge is purposely making calls in favor of their friends, that's something that needs to be brought up with Fantasy Flight Games. A judge that is mean or unkind. So one thing that I want to be clear is Cascade Games is not going to... We do not have the resources to run a conduct committee or police judges specifically. That is, as members of the Star Wars Unlimited community, that falls under the Fantasy Flight Games code of conduct. And so judges are treated like players in that way, and if somebody's behaving inappropriately or committing offenses that are not allowed, that needs to be communicated to Fantasy Flight Games. Obviously, a judge is not going to self-report themselves if they are committing tournament fraud. I hope that is relatively infrequent. But I do know that some people will abuse any power or authority that they have. Reaching out to Fantasy Flight through their Contact Us customer service regarding the code of conduct is the way to do that if somebody's being mean, unkind, or fraudulent. However, as a judge, I will be disappointed in you, first of all, and I think the rest of the community will be disappointed in you if you are mean and unkind and commit tournament fraud. And I do want to continue to strive that it is important to be able to make mistakes and to be wrong. That's something that we talk about in this lesson. And it's something that I've done on stream. There have been a lot of broadcasts where somebody has asked me a question and I've answered it, and I've been wrong on these broadcasts, and you just admit that you're wrong. You point out, somebody points out where you're wrong. You're like, oh, yep, I missed that line of the comprehensive rules, or I interpret it differently. Your interpretation or understanding is correct. Making a big deal out of it or ignoring it entirely is problematic. Torian asks, what is your approach about unsporting behavior, for example, dice rolling during the end of round, during termination, in competitive events? That is a complicated answer, or a complicated question. It depends a lot on the players, what I see happen, what I know happens. The short version is I determine if the players are aware of if what they did is illegal. If they are, I punish them strictly. If a player knows that they're not allowed to gamble, they're not allowed to ask their opponent to concede, and they do that, policy says this is strictly not allowed. You will be disqualified if they do that. If they are aware of that and they take the action anyways, I'm going to disqualify them. If they're not aware, I'm going to educate them. I'm going to be like, hey, this is not a thing that you're allowed to do. This is a very huge problem for these reasons, and go bop, 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 bop. If they do it again in that event, they're gone, because I have sat down and explained to them what they're not allowed to do and why they're not allowed to do it, and I now know that they're not allowed to do it. If there's other types of unsporting behavior, such as a player being kind of rude, just like a little snarky, like, ha, you didn't get to play any units this game, I killed you so fast, or something like that, I'll have a short conversation with that player, maybe issue a minor penalty, and just be like, hey, that's not appropriate behavior. If it's something more significant, like a player loudly complaining that their opponent sucks or making accusations of cheating when there's no evidence of any cheating, they're just like, I lost, therefore my opponent had to be cheating. I'll be like, look, you sound like you're a child who's, like, you're throwing a temper tantrum. This is wildly inappropriate, and issue a more significant penalty. In all cases, it comes down to educating the player what they're doing is wrong and giving them the opportunity to take it back, unless they double down and they're like, no, my opponent clearly was cheating because there's no way I could have lost. My deck is perfect. I'll be like, do you have any evidence? And they're like, no, I have no evidence. It's just my gut feeling. I'm going to let everybody know that they're cheating and that you're a bad judge. And I'm like, cool, this behavior isn't allowed. I'm going to gatekeep you because this is, you are not allowed in, the players aren't going to be happy with you being here. Tournament organizer, event organizers aren't going to be happy with you here, etc. Fazit asks, I would assume that contact would be often easier if you do it through the tournament organizer. Yes, absolutely. However, sometimes the tournament organizer might be turning a blind eye or be complicit in this. I really hate to say that, but that is true. And yeah, sometimes contact through the tournament organizer should be your first step. The tournament organizer can affect it, but yeah. Part of that conversation, and we're going back to the lesson as scripted, is that you're always on. If you take part in these negative behaviors, if you're a salty player, if you're upset because your opponent beat you, or if you tease your opponents too mercilessly, that's going to wear against your reputation as a judge. Beyond that is how you will be presented to people who don't know you. And so there is a little bit more of a standard for judges than for players, simply because you have a position of implicit authority in your community as a certified judge. If you are acting as a jerk to your friends and making fun of your friends, people will potentially see you as somebody who would do that to them, and they'll be less likely to call you over if they have an issue at their table, because they don't want to be mocked. And so it's important to make sure that the people around you aren't misinterpreting your actions. And so perception is reality. What people see is real to them, and you need to make sure that you're not perceived as a jerk, because when you become a judge, they'll be like, oh, that's a jerk judge. I don't want to interact with that person. They are not a good judge, even if they have no actual experience with you as a judge and you're a delightful human being. Calantares asks, are we supposed to be particularly protective and helpful toward completely new players? So I would recommend that if you have a completely new player in a casual event, give them more guidance. Absolutely. If you have a completely new player in a competitive event, guide them towards casual events. Octurnal said, I once had someone asked a judge to DQ me for missing a Falcon trigger. Yep, people will ask for all sorts of disqualifications. And other people will be like, there's no reason I should be disqualified. I absolutely wasn't doing anything. Yeah. Tunnel Safety Commissioner, if time allows, always give help to new players. If you're running an event and need to be elsewhere, don't let the event slide for a newer player. Yeah, 100%. Do what you can. If you're doing like a sealed or draft event, players are allowed to get advice from other players regarding their deck construction, because you're allowed to switch your deck between rounds and between games. And so between rounds, you're allowed to talk with your friends and change your deck. And again, this is only a casual tier events. This is not allowed a competitive tier events where you have a deck list. But you're able to change your deck on the fly at casual tier events. And that means between rounds, you'd be able to talk with your friends and be like, hey, how can I build this deck better? At a casual tier event, say like a pre-release of players like, hey, I'm brand new, how do I build a deck? You'll be like, okay, first of all, I recommend not putting like a like if you're going to be running a heroic red-green deck, maybe don't put a double cunning card in there, because that card is going to be wholly unplayable, and while it's a good card, it's not worth paying 4 extra for. And giving some direct advice in that sort of situation would be helpful. All right. This ties into being keepers of the peace and not enforcers of the law. This is another big thing that I want to talk about. It's our job to ensure that games are fun and fair. But we, in order to enforce this and in order to enforce the rules, we need to be called over when an error is made. If every time we get called over we DQ a player or issue a game loss, players will suddenly stop calling judges and just fix stuff themselves. They'll be like, there is no point in calling over a judge. The two of us can come to agreement where we'll just like change this damage marker and proceed from there, and we'll just keep on going. And if we call a judge, one of us will get a game loss, and that sucks. And so players will stop calling judges, and then we can't help players. And so we need to make sure that we are enforcing the rules and keeping things fair, and not making sure that everything is perfect and penalizing harshly when players break rules. DQing somebody for one mistake, particularly an innocent one, that's going to be something that you shouldn't do. We're not the Empire. This is something that I'm going to say a lot. But yeah, we don't want players to fear us, because if players fear us, we cannot do our jobs. We are an organization about learning, not just teaching players the rules, but judges in general are tied together by two key elements. We all care deeply about this game. If you didn't care about Star Wars Unlimited, you would not be in this conversation right now. You wouldn't be watching this video later as a VOD. And you care about learning and teaching and understanding the rules. Like, if you didn't care about the rules, and if you didn't care about the game, you didn't care about sharing that knowledge, you probably wouldn't be a judge. And one of the long-term keys to success is judges helping teach other judges. This was a question somebody asked earlier. But I'd love to be able to provide individualized feedback for every one of you and sit down for you and just talk to you about every single situation that comes up. But I have limited time in the day. And so I am expecting you at some point to talk to each other. It's already happening in the Discord. People are asking questions and answering and talking about philosophy to a degree. And as people get stronger and stronger, that will grow. But notably, I want to make very clear something. Teaching is a two-way street. Mentorship is not a one-way road. It is not, I teach the level 5s, and the level 5s teach the level 4s, and the level 4s teach the level 3s, and the level 3s teach the level 2s, who teach the 1s, who teach the judge apprentices, who teach the players. It is possible to learn something from everybody. I've been judging for a decade, and I have learned things from judges who've been judging for a month. somebody will come up and be like, hey, have you ever considered doing this way? I'll be like, no, I haven't. I have not considered that in a decade of doing it, simply because that wasn't how I was taught. You were taught a different way, and your way is better. We can all learn from each other. I can learn from every single one of you, and I'm excited to work events with all of you and learn from all of you. The feedback that I get from you is all great. You all care so much. That's what prompts the feedback, and I deeply, deeply appreciate that. Nilrim asks, what if as a judge, before the event and at the top cut, you say no collusion, and then someone openly discusses collusion at the table? If you're confident that they heard you, you'll be like, you're not allowed to do that, goodbye. That is an unfortunate reality, but we cannot have collusion in this game. We cannot have gambling in this game. And so you need to just let them know that it's not allowed. Explain to them that you've already explained to them that it's not allowed and that they did it anyways, and that you're going to be removing them from the event. When you disqualify somebody, I think it's important to remember that it is a single action that you are disqualifying them for. You aren't disqualifying them because they are a cheater or a colluder. You are disqualifying them because they cheated or because they colluded. This is maybe a semantic difference to make. This is very minor, but it's important to make it so that it is not the person, but their action. Fazit, attempted collusion is only an escalated penalty in current policy, yes. And yeah, Jimmy DeHand, because I said so, doesn't generate a ton of goodwill. That is 100% correct. Being able to explain things either through rules documents or a deeper philosophy is great. Because sometimes you're going to be wrong. We need to be prepared to be wrong. You'll sometimes remember a ruling and be like, yeah, the answer is blah. And you'll remember incorrectly. You'll remember that it was dealing with Luke Skywalker. What is it? I can't remember the leader's name. You'll mix up two Luke Skywalkers or two Chewies or whatever. And you'll give an incorrect answer. Or you'll misremember a rule and you'll get something wrong. It's okay to be wrong. I've been wrong. I can't even count the number of times I've been wrong. And it's important to not let your pride get the better of you. It's important to be able to say, I'm not actually sure. Let me double check and see what the rules say. Give me a moment and pull up the rules on your phone and double check the relevant passage and then give your ruling. There's rules text on Battlefield, Murray. It's just like, what does it say? I'm pulling it up because it's important to me to know everything, even though you obviously can't. Okay, there's no rules text. You tricked me. You tricked me. Oh my gosh. See? I was like, does it have Sentinel? Does it have Restore 1? Our memories will fail us. And when you make a mistake, you're just like, oh, I'm sorry I made a mistake. Don't brush it off and be like, I made a mistake, you'll have to deal with it, but it's, I made a mistake, here's how we can fix it. How to get better. There are an endless number of ways to improve as a judge. And I honestly don't recommend reading the comprehensive rules. I've been reading them a lot to write the lessons. I don't recommend that as a way of studying. I haven't actually learned as much from reading the rules because I've read the rules many, many times. The way I've learned the rules, the way I've begun to understand these better, is by teaching y'all, by writing the lessons, by talking to you. That's how I've learned. Being able to explain it requires mastery of it. Or at least a good understanding. Similarly, when you're like, hey, but how does this card work with this card and this card? I'm like, okay, I have no idea. Let me pull up the relevant rules. Let me pull up the cards. That forces me to get better. So the best way, I think, is to teach people. Either players or judges or in Discord, answer questions. That's the best way to learn. Another great way to learn, play the game. Play the game more. You'll learn what cards or interactions come up frequently. The number of times I have, studied something and okay, understand this niche rule. I can explain to anybody. And then it never, ever comes up because it is a niche rule and it doesn't matter. And people are like, hey, what happens when I attack a 3-3 with a 3-4? You're like, You need me to explain that to you? Okay, let me see if I can figure out how to explain that to you in a way that makes sense. But if that's a question that comes up, or more likely, Lurking TIE Phantom questions, or Bosk and Crate Dragon questions, that's... Playing the game is going to teach you, and it's going to teach you what's important to players. So it's going to teach you what are players paying attention to, what are players not paying attention to. And that means when you're asking questions, you'll know what players generally will know and won't know. And that helps you investigate better. One of the things that I want to talk about what you should study. And I just told you should study the CR and that you should learn interactions. But you shouldn't study interactions. I don't want you to memorize how Lurking TIE Phantom works with every single card that it has a weird interaction with. Because memorizing every Lurking TIE Phantom interaction is good for now. There's only 500 cards, and only 200 of them have an interesting interaction with Lurking TIE Phantom. So you can memorize all 200 of those. In the next 3 years, there's going to be, another 2,000 cards? 3,000 cards? Memorizing the interactions of all of those with Lurking TIE Phantom is going to be an impossible task. And the next time that there's an ability similar to Lurking TIE Phantom, if you have just the specific interaction, it's this card and this card is this result, that's not great. Because you're only able to answer that one question. If you understand the underlying rules, that's better. So don't study the comprehensive rules. Talk about specific interactions. Don't learn specific interactions. Learn the comprehensive rules. I know that sounds a little self-contradictory, but get practical experience with real calls, and then use that to understand the rules on a fundamental level so that you're able to handle these situations as they come up. Also, learn how to look things up. This is one of the most valuable tools you'll have. As I've mentioned, you're not going to remember everything. Being able to know where to look to point to the rule that says this is how this works is very important. Pointing out, one of the big ones for me is the way the Bosk trigger and the Crate Dragon trigger works with events. That is listed in, I believe it's listed in events, which is section 3.3. It's not listed under triggered abilities, which is where I thought it would be. And so knowing that it's there, I can point to it with relative ease. Finally, as a little bit of wrap up, what judging can mean to you. This one's a little bit more personal, but we've talked about what you do as a judge, your role in the community. How to get better and all of that. But what does judging do? I've been a judge for a decade. I've been judging Magic and Flesh and Blood for 10 years now. And there's a lot that, I'm in this position because of judging. I get to interact with all of you because of this, and I get to make new friends through this. I've made new friends through the Star Wars Unlimited Judge program already, even though it's only a few weeks old. You get to improve yourself. One of the things that I talk about is a decade ago I was the events manager, or became the events manager at my local game store, running events 4 nights a week. And when I first started, when I ran my first draft, there were 8 players in the draft, and when I had to instruct players to find their seats, my legs were actually shaking. Talking to 8 people that I knew by name and knew well and had hung out with and drafted before, and I could sit down and draft and chat with all 8 of them and be entirely fine. But as soon as I was in a position of authority and everybody's attention was on me, that was intense, and I was nervous. Now I'm happy to run broadcasts. I'm comfortable getting up on a stage, grabbing a microphone, and making announcements to a hall with thousands upon thousands of players. Although it helps that I know that 0 players in the event hall are listening to me, because nobody ever listens to any announcements. But judging will have you develop friendships. I've had a friend for close to a decade now who knows nothing about Star Wars. He's never seen any of the movies. He's never read a single book. He knows nothing. And so he asks me all sorts of silly questions. He'll be like, "Hey, Jonah, where's the best sushi?" That's the question he'll ask me. Where is the best sushi? And I know over the years of us having these conversations he's asking, where's the best sushi in Star Wars. And that's... I make some arguments for Kamino. Mon Cal's another good one. There are a couple other aquatic planets. There's a tropical resort planet in True Colors, the old Legends book, that I think would have some really excellent sushi. Anyways, he asked me questions like that, and that's a great part of our friendship that I would never have had without judging. I've had friends get job offers working for card developers, for game designers, that sort of thing, because of their work as judge. I have a friend who's working as one of the directors for food and beverage at a theme park because of judging. The leadership and management skills that they developed because of judging transferred to running a theme park effectively. And now they're in charge of a theme park, which is kind of crazy because now I can go to a theme park for free because my friend is good at judging. I've had friends get married because of judging. But for many, and this ties back into the whole thing, it's a place where you can be a part of a community, where you can help make people feel safe and comfortable. You can advocate for people who have a difficult time speaking up for themselves. You can make a small corner of the world a happier and better place. And it can be a happier and better place for you and for other people. As you get deeper into judging, if you don't focus on that small niche of your local game store, being able to travel to large events. I know some people traveled to Seattle this past weekend for PAX West. Some people traveled to San Diego for San Diego Comic-Con. I'm sure that there will be events at Gamescom and Essen, UK Games Expo. There will be events in Japan. There will be being able to travel to Star Wars Celebration to run Star Wars Unlimited events at those. Those are opportunities that may open up to people. And so you'll get to travel to new places, experience new cultures. It's a great way to just expand your own horizons and to have fun. And that's the end of today's chat. We went a little bit over, but I spent a lot of time chatting with y'all about some broad philosophy things. See, I love this argument about sushi. See, it's great. So I don't think it's banned on Mon Cala because it's an aquatic planet. The only thing they have is aquatic life forms, right? Like, obviously you're not going to be eating corn and Mon Cal. That's cannibalistic. But, like, on Earth, mammals eat mammals. And so fish can eat fish on Kamino. Or, not on Kamino, sorry, Mon Cal. And because that's the only thing they have, it's gotta be good, right? The argument for Naboo, I think, is a really good argument. Because they have, like, the humans have this very decadent style. And the Gungans do have a lot of access to fish and a lot of... Oh, boy. See? Wonderful questions to ask. The other question that I've been asked, one of the other great questions I've been asked, is which primary character, so any of the major characters from the movies, we're not going to go into Legends canon because it's a lot, or into Expanded Universe, but just from the movies, who would be the best character to raise flamingos? On that note, thank you all. Thanks for your time. And I'll see you next Tuesday. No stream this Thursday, or no stream for the Thursday lesson. I'm going to be traveling to SCG Con Tampa. I'm going to be judging some Star Wars Unlimited down there. And so I'm not going to be able to do a broadcast this weekend. So the next time you're going to be seeing me live is next Tuesday. Probably going to be doing 12 hours later than this so we can get a little bit of a different audience. And we're just going to alternate between those times. Talk to y'all later. Have a good one.